Some of the most powerful people in the world appeared to be running the same cryptocurrency scam. It started with a tweet, then another, and another. Within minutes, accounts belonging to Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Apple, Uber, and dozens of other high-profile figures began posting an identical message. The offer was simple. Send Bitcoin to a specific wallet address, and the amount would be doubled and returned. It was the kind of scam that normally appears on obscure accounts with no followers. Except this time, it was being promoted by some of the most recognizable names on the internet. For a brief moment, nobody knew what was happening. Had these accounts been hacked individually? Was Twitter under attack? Or was something even bigger unfolding behind the scenes? As users watched the tweets spread across the platform, one thing became increasingly clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. The list of compromised accounts kept growing. Every few minutes, another major name appeared. And with each new account, the situation became harder to explain. Because if someone could take over Elon Musk's account, that was serious. But if they could also access Barack Obama's account, Apple's account, and Twitter had no immediate way to stop it, then the attackers weren't targeting individual users. They were targeting something much more valuable. As the scam spread across Twitter, confusion quickly turned into panic. The affected accounts didn't have much in common. Some belonged to politicians, others belonged to tech CEOs. Some were major corporations, others were celebrities. The victims weren't connected by industry, geography, or even personal relationships. Yet somehow, they were all being compromised at the same time. At first, many assumed the attackers had discovered a new way to break into Twitter accounts. But that explanation raised more questions than answers. Because every major account on the platform didn't share the same password. They didn't share the same email address. And many of them had additional security protections enabled. Breaking into one account would be difficult. Breaking into dozens of the world's most recognizable accounts at the same time seemed almost impossible. Meanwhile, the scam continued generating attention. Some users immediately recognized it as fraud, others didn't. Cryptocurrency began flowing into the wallet address promoted in the tweets. The longer the attack continued, the worse Twitter's problem became. Eventually, the company took an extraordinary step. Verified accounts were temporarily restricted from tweeting. For several hours, even legitimate account owners couldn't post normally. Twitter was effectively trying to contain its own platform. But by then, investigators were already beginning to suspect something far more serious. The attackers hadn't found a way into the accounts. They had found a way around them. As investigators pieced together what had happened, a different picture began to emerge. The attackers hadn't hacked Elon Musk. They hadn't hacked Barack Obama. They hadn't hacked Bill Gates. In fact, most of the compromised accounts were never directly targeted at all. Instead, the attackers had gained access to something far more powerful. Twitter's internal administration tools. These weren't public features available to ordinary users. They were tools used by Twitter employees to manage accounts, resolve support issues, and make changes behind the scenes. With access to those systems, the attackers didn't need passwords. They didn't need to defeat two-factor authentication, and they didn't need permission from account owners. They could simply change account settings from inside Twitter's own infrastructure. Suddenly, everything made sense. The reason so many unrelated accounts had fallen victim wasn't because each one had been individually compromised. It was because the attackers had gained access to the system, controlling them all. But that discovery immediately created a much bigger question. If Twitter's internal tools were involved, How had outsiders managed to get their hands on them? The answer wasn't a sophisticated cyber weapon. It wasn't a secret vulnerability buried deep inside Twitter's code. And it wasn't the work of an elite nation-state hacking group. The attackers gained access through something far simpler: people. According to investigators, members of the group targeted Twitter employees directly. Posing as members of Twitter's internal IT department, they contacted employees and claimed they were helping resolve a VPN-related issue. It sounded routine. After all, technical support requests happen every day inside large technology companies. There was nothing obviously suspicious about the conversation, at least not at first. During those interactions, employees were directed to a website that appeared legitimate. The page closely resembled Twitter's internal login systems. To the average employee, it looked authentic, but it wasn't. It was a phishing portal specifically designed to steal credentials. The moment those credentials were entered, the attackers gained exactly what they needed: access, not to celebrity accounts, not to public profiles, but to Twitter's internal systems themselves. And once they were inside, the balance of power changed completely. With administrative access, they could modify account settings, change associated email addresses, and bypass many of the protections ordinary users relied on. Suddenly, some of the most secure accounts on the platform were no longer protected by their owners. They were protected by a system the attackers now partially controlled. The entire attack had depended on a simple deception: no complex malware, no advanced exploit chain, just a convincing story told to the right people. But while investigators were uncovering how the attack happened, another question remained unanswered: who was actually behind it? As investigators followed the trail, attention gradually shifted toward a teenager living hundreds of miles away from Twitter's headquarters. His name was Graham Ivan Clark. He was only 17 years old, and according to prosecutors, he played a central role in orchestrating the attack. The revelation surprised many people. By this point, the incident had become international news. Some of the world's most influential public figures had been compromised. Twitter itself had been forced into emergency response mode. Yet the alleged mastermind wasn't an intelligence agency. He wasn't a veteran cybercriminal with decades of experience. He was still a teenager. But investigators believed this wasn't his first involvement in online fraud. Before the Twitter breach, underground communities had developed around so-called OG usernames. Short, rare, and highly desirable usernames that could be bought and sold for thousands of dollars. Access to valuable accounts had become a business, and in those communities, reputation mattered. According to reports surrounding the case, obtaining control of high-value usernames was one of the group's primary interests. The Bitcoin scam itself may not have been the original objective. Instead, it appeared to be an opportunity created by unprecedented access. Once the attackers realized what they could do, they exploited it. But despite successfully breaching one of the world's largest social media platforms, the operation had already begun leaving traces behind. For a brief moment, it seemed like the attackers had pulled off the perfect crime. They had compromised Twitter's internal systems, taken control of some of the platform's most influential accounts, generated global headlines, and disappeared. But cybercrime has a unique problem. Every action leaves behind evidence. Every message, every login, every transaction. Somewhere, a record usually exists. Investigators began examining the digital trail left behind by the attackers. Cryptocurrency transactions were analyzed. Online communications were reviewed. Account activity was reconstructed piece by piece. What initially appeared chaotic slowly began forming a clearer picture. The attackers had successfully breached Twitter, but they hadn't completely hidden themselves. Small mistakes started adding up. Fragments of information connected to online identities connected to real people, and eventually, investigators believed they had identified the individuals involved. The circle was closing. What began as one of the most embarrassing security failures in Twitter's history was rapidly becoming a criminal investigation. Just weeks after the attack, authorities made their move. Graham Ivan Clark was arrested in Florida. Prosecutors identified him as a key figure behind the operation. 2 other individuals were also charged in connection with the broader scheme: Nima Fazeli from Orlando and Mason Shepard from the United Kingdom. As details emerged, the story became even more remarkable. One of the largest social media security breaches in history had not been carried out by a sophisticated nation-state. It had been carried out by a small group of young individuals operating online. In 2021, Clark pleaded guilty to organized fraud charges. He was sentenced to 3 years in a youth prison program followed by probation. The legal chapter of the story was coming to an end, but the questions raised by the attack were only beginning. The Twitter hack exposed a weakness that exists far beyond a single company, because despite all the security systems, monitoring tools, and protective technologies in place, the attackers never needed to defeat Twitter's infrastructure. They only needed to convince someone to trust them. And that's what made the incident so unsettling. Not that Twitter's technology failed, but that human trust became the entry point. In July 2020, a 17-year-old didn't outsmart Twitter's code. He outsmarted the people protecting it. And for a few hours, that was enough to take control of some of the most influential accounts on the internet. If this gives you more understanding about the Twitter's crypto hacking case, consider subscribing to my channel, because the next case I will be unveiling is more complex and complicated than this. See you in my next video.